This is draft season presented by Moody's. Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. It's our first draft season of the year. Very excited. The college football season kicking off this weekend. And joining us is a guy that joins us every year here on draft season. Right around this time, Bruce Feldman from The Athletic and Fox Sports. He publishes his 2025 Freaks List every year around this time, and now he's here to talk about it. And now we welcome on our guest. He is from Fox. He is from The Athletic. And no one covers college football better than him, the one and only Bruce Feldman. Bruce, how are you, man?
Great to be on with you, John. I'm doing good.
It's great to see you. And our annual tradition now, your Freaks List always comes out in August. It is out. And I think what struck me about it, and we'll get to the guy that was number one on your list in a second, a lot of large men at the top of this list, Bruce. And I feel like that's going to represent what this upcoming draft class looks like a little bit too. A lot of big guys up front on offense and defense.
Yeah, Caden Proctor is an enormous guy. He's number two on the list. He's a left tackle at Alabama. He's 6'7", he's basically 370. I was just down in Tuscaloosa last week. I mean, I had him at 366. I'm told he's a little north of 370. Super strong. He's a guy who bench presses, well over 500 pounds, squats a ton, almost literally, and power cleans over 400 pounds. But the numbers that kind of blew me away were when I found out he vertical jumped 32 inches this offseason and broad jumps, 9.5 feet, 9.5. Those are crazy numbers. And put the vertical jump in context. There were 5 receivers who were at this year's NFL Combine who either broad jumped just that high or didn't even get as high as Proctor did. And one of them, LeJohntay Wester, who's a rookie kick returner and had like an 85-yard punt return 2 weeks ago. He played at CU. He jumped the same as Proctor, and Proctor's is 200 pounds heavier than him.
Is Proctor one of these guys, Bruce, that we're going to be talking in the spring where teams are going to be saying, look, we want you to lose 20 pounds? I know you had him in your story about 26% body fat. Or is this a guy that can legitimately stay out at left tackle and carry that kind of weight?
My guess is people will want him closer to 350. But when I was down there, I asked them because obviously I had Evan Neal, who you and your listeners know well, was on the Freaks List a few years ago. They're different personalities, is how the coaches there kind of told me in terms of that. And athletically, they're different. They're both enormous men. Obviously, Evans, moved positions and has definitely had some adjustments. I don't want to say that Proctor may be more naturally talented, maybe not quite as maybe as same different personality, maybe not as mature as Evan was at the same stage. But it's going to be interesting to see what the NFL starts to evaluate these guys at, because Proctor plays on a line. I've never had 3 guys on the same O line all on the Freaks List, and there's 3 of them. And this should be one of the best offensive lines in college football. And it's impressive because these guys are all like live in the weight room.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the other two guys, Parker Brailsford and Jaden Roberts. What have you heard about those two guys coming out of Alabama, who obviously has done a real good job producing offensive linemen over the years?
Yeah, Roberts is a guard. He was on there last year. He's just a physical specimen, as a powerhouse. Brailsford's the most interesting of the 3 to me. He is an Arizona kid who was not a huge recruit, went to Washington, and then as a redshirt freshman, he was, Michael Penix's team. They were rolling. They played for the national title. He was the starting center of the offensive line that won the Joe Moore Award, which goes to the best offensive line in college football. He ended up transferring after the coaching change and Kalen DeBoer left to replace Nick Saban. He moves really well. He was a track kid in high school, wasn't a wrestler, but everybody assumes he was a wrestler because of the way he plays. I mean, he bench presses over 500 pounds. He's going to run probably in the high 4.8s. Super smart, as you expect with most centers. Really interesting kid. Spent a bunch of time with him the other day, and studied a lot of Jason Kelsey. I suspect he'll be a top 50 pick. I think people would like to see him a little bigger, but he's close to 300 pounds. I mean, he's probably a little taller than I expected him to be. Sometimes when you hear somebody 6'2", you expect him to be 6 feet and a half. No, he's
Right.
not. But he is really athletic. He's really strong. And he's one of the coaches, without me really asking about him, said they thought he was like the smartest player in the program. So I think NFL scouts will really like him.
Certainly something you want out of your center. All right, let's go to another big guy that's up high on your list. That's Peter Woods out of Clemson. And boy, their defense is absolutely stacked this year, Bruce. They might have the most talented defense in college football. 6'3", 310, 4.86 40, 34 reps on the bench. He could probably be a top five pick, right?
Yeah, he's super explosive, was a big recruit. This is his third year. Last year took a step forward. They played him sometimes outside, sometimes inside. Tom Allen is the new defensive coordinator at Clemson. You're right, John. This is a really talented defense who did not play like it last year. They were undisciplined. They were out of sync. Coordinator change is different. Um, I think he will be a dominant player this year. And we got a big test for him week one. They play LSU, and LSU is pretty loaded, but LSU lost four starting offensive linemen from last year. They were all at the Senior Bowl. They plugged in some transfers. They have some talent on the O line, and Garrett Nussmeier is a guy a lot of people are really excited about. I think he'll be a first round quarterback. They have a lot of speed. But if Woods totally dominates the game and it's at Clemson, it could be a rough start for Brian Kelly's team to play there in the other Death Valley, as Clemson's home stadium is known as well.
No question. All right, let's go to Keldrick Falk. You know, we saw Abdul Carter go to the Giants high in last year's draft. He was more of your smaller edge type, right? Well, this draft and Falk's one of these guys. I think Bruce probably has some of like the bigger Bill Belichick kind of edge X players. He's 6'6", he's 285. They play him inside the three tech, some five tech stuff. I watched a lot of his tape from last year. This is another guy with the talent. He's just going to turn 20 this year that he could be knocking on the door as a top three, top five pick.
He could. I mean, he's got length. He's really strong. And I think he's been a guy who's had a lot of buzz around him in the SEC. And that Auburn program has been spinning its wheels for a little while. They need him to be a dominant player. He definitely flashes, but they need him to be a guy who is the most disruptive D lineman in the SEC. There's a really elite young defensive lineman at South Carolina, Dylan Stewart, but he's only a sophomore. He can't come out. It's his second year sophomore. This guy, though, I think he has the potential. And there's another also second year sophomore who's a smaller defensive, a smaller edge guy in Colin Simmons at Texas. But Falk is, like you said, I mean, he's the guy that you would remember back in the old Giant days when it was like, not the NY, when it was the full name Giants across the helmet.
Like
That's what it
George
felt like
Martin,
back
right?
then.
Like one of those edge guys, right?
But a
Like a
lot
big.
bigger than George Martin. Yeah, it was like Leonard Marshall, but maybe not quite that hefty.
No, absolutely. He's a very exciting player to me. And then I want to hit a couple other defensive tackles, Bruce, because I feel you have a lot of these guys high in the list. Francis Mauigoa, the offensive tackle. We'll get to him in a second. I want to talk about Dom Orange out of Iowa State because I did watch him over the summer, 6'4", 325. Man, all the freak stuff that you talk about in your article, and I want you to get to it, it shows up. Why do you think maybe the production hasn't matched some of those traits in his career at Iowa State so far?
Yeah, I think there's been a little inconsistency at times. It'll be an interesting matchup week two. So week zero, which is the first week of the season. And I don't know when this is running, but so he may have already played this game, but
No,
they're going to play K-State.
this will air Friday, so it'll be right before week zero.
Okay, so
Yep.
yes, so opening weekend of the season, this is the best game of the opening week. K-State against Iowa State. It's in Dublin, Ireland. Logan, there's a really good center he's going to play in their second game when they play Iowa, their rival. Logan Jones is also on the freaks list. He's super explosive center. He might be more explosive than Tyler Linderbaum. He's a basketball player, whereas Linderbaum was a wrestler. But I think with Orange, because you in the system, it's a really good defensive, 3-3-5. I think there are times where it feels like he's a little out of sync and everything. And I don't know if it's just, from a conditioning standpoint, because from what I'm told, one of the things this offseason that he's really worked on was diet and just to be in better physical shape. And I think that will probably help in some of that, maybe whether it's a lack of focus or a little bit of just getting winded at times. But you're right. He is super explosive. Again, a 325-pound guy. I would not be surprised if he was a first round pick. But this is a big, big year for him.
Three other DTs I want to hit here, Bruce, that you were pretty high on your list. Amari Washington out of Oregon, the huge nose guard type. Then you have Zane Durant out of Penn State, very different type of defensive tackle, just 290. And then I always like to give the Service Academy kids some love. Landon Robinson out of Navy. Talk about those three guys for me.
All right, let me start with Landon Robinson. I love his story. So he was like 240 pounds when he got there. He's like 286 now. He's 6 feet. He's really explosive. He's going to vertical jump 33 inches. The best thing I would say about him, it's not necessarily freakless stuff, but when they played their arch rival, Army was undefeated late in the year, obviously. And he had 13 tackles, a career high. He also had like a 32-yard run on a fake punt on a 4th and 5 late in the game to seal the game. They've given him the ball 3 times. He's averaging like 30 yards a carry,
That's pretty good.
and yeah, he's really, really strong. I mean, he's almost a 500-pound bencher. He's got a ton of energy in terms of personality and everything. Like, he's a fun player. I, you know, as I'm about to transition to Zane Durant is a little smaller. He's even more explosive. And this is where I'm going to bring up the Aaron Donald comparison. Zane Durant runs 4.66. We've talked a lot about freaksless guys at Penn State on your show. And Zane Durant is right there. He wasn't that big a recruit coming out of, the North Florida area, but he is so explosive. And the center at Penn State, Nick Dawkins, Daryl Dawkins' son, like that Daryl Dawkins, great talker, really good college center. I asked him a couple of weeks back, I was like, who's the best defensive lineman you faced in college? And remember, he played the guys at Oregon. He had a first round pick, and Jamari Caldwell is also in the NFL. He's seen some elite guys, Tyleik Williams, who went high in the draft from Ohio State. And he was like, hands down, Zane Durant. It's not even close, and just so explosive, so disruptive. Again, he's a little south of 290, but in the right scheme, he is hell to block. Now, he's probably not a scheme fit for everybody, but he's super disruptive. And I think with Jim Knowles, who had been the defensive coordinator at Ohio State when they won the national title, going in there, I think this is they have denied Dennis Sutton, who's an outside guy, who's a really good football player. They got Tony Rojas, who I don't know if we'll talk to, but he's a freaksless linebacker who can really, really run. They got so many dudes, but this guy is the one that I think is the scariest of the Penn State group.
Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risks into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. We're coming to you from the Giants podcast studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Don't forget to run or walk with Giants legends. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K running kids race presented by Quest on Sunday, October 26th at 9 a.m. at MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative t-shirt. And after the race, stick around. You'll have a festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at giants.com/5K. The Giants Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. And then you mentioned Jamari
I'm sorry, and
Caldwell.
I'm missing you.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, it's
So
funny. You mentioned Jamari Caldwell in the answer. One of his teammates last year with Derek Harmon was the massive nose guard they have over there, right?
yeah, Amari Washington, when they sent me his numbers, it was like a triple take because he's almost 340 pounds. He vertical jumps 36 inches. I mean, his bench press is like 475. Hits almost 21 miles per hour on the GPS. And so Dan Lanning, the head coach there, who came from was at Georgia, was at Alabama, he's seen a lot of freaky D linemen. And this guy has all those traits, and they feel like he's ready to take the next step. He made some plays last year. They need him to be a dominator this year. And he has all the physical tools to be that, but we need to see it. There's a lot of guys, like obviously, we just talked about the Navy defensive lineman, Zane Durant. Those guys have done it. Like last year, especially for Durant, he broke through. This is a guy in Washington where we need to see it. Like last year, Derek Harmon was a huge problem for defense. Jamari Caldwell at times was a big problem. They need that guy to be like this. That's what they need him to be like they were last year if they're going to take the next step. Now, Mateo Uiagalelei, an outside rusher, Tatum Tuioti, those guys are really good players outside, but they need the guy who just disrupts everything inside to make it all just take it to the next level.
All right, let's jump to the offensive side of the ball. I guess it's no surprise, Bruce, that two Iowa offensive linemen are on this list. You already mentioned Logan Jones, but he's not alone.
Yeah, Cade Peeper is like the numbers that these guys both are like, 37-inch vertical, super like fast in the 10-yard split. Both those guys were setting Iowa program records for one for a guard, one for a center. Logan Jones was actually a high school basketball player. He told me he first dunked in ninth grade when he was 6'1". He's around, 300 pounds. He is one of those typical Iowa offensive linemen where you're like, okay, he was a really good all-around athlete who just kept on getting stronger and crazy stronger every off season. And he's a really good football player. I actually have three freaks list guys from Iowa all in the top 50. Like, I don't want to say none of them were huge recruits, but like you go through the list. I mean, Tristan Wirfs was once my number one overall freak. He's obviously, had a really good NFL career. I mentioned Lindebaum, who was a really great player for them and went pretty high in the draft, or even though he's a little undersized. But this is what Kirk Ferentz does. I feel like there's no head coach in college football that knows offensive linemen any better than Kirk Ferentz does. He's an old Belichick guy. And he coached O-line for a long time. He just has a great feel for it. And I think they have a real knack for finding guys, whether they were a 4-star or a 2-star. They just have a feel for it.
That's a very important position to have a good feel for, that's for sure. All right, other offensive tackle I want to hit. I mentioned him before, Francis Mauigoa out of Miami, 6'6", 235. You know him down for a 157 10-yard split in the 40. That's crazy for a man that size.
Yeah, Maui Noah, I mean, the G is pronounced so the N. He was a huge 5-star recruit for Mario Cristobal. Cristobal, when he was at Oregon, had Penei Sewell. I mean, he had a lot of big time linemen over the years, but Penei Sewell was a major get for him, who he was like probably higher on than most other people were. And obviously that guy turned out to be a dominant player. Maui Noah's been at right tackle since he got there. Just super explosive power in terms of the numbers that he puts up. He's close to 340 pounds, just a big frame. I think the best thing that if you're an NFL team that you look at, you're like, okay, Cristobal, if he knows one thing, it is about big people. And you'd seen it pretty much everywhere he's been. And certainly, whether it was at Alabama and then obviously at Oregon when they really upgraded the guys in the trenches. Now we're seeing it at Miami. This is a massive offensive line, and this is the freakiest of the group.
All right, let's go to the skill position guys here, Bruce. And a guy that, if people have kept track of your list over the years, is a name that'll look very familiar. He checks in near the top of your list, and that is Nick Harbor, who's 6'5" and 245 at wide receiver, ran a 10-1-1 100-meter. He finally got going a little bit last year at 26 catches, 376 yards. What have you heard from the people there about A, his continuing development as a wide receiver, and if maybe especially with the quarterback there, which we'll get to as well, maybe a breakout's incoming for him?
Yeah, they need to see it more. I mean, he's still pretty raw, for not this past year, but the year before that, he was still running track at a high level at South Carolina. And that's what he was coming out of high school. He's running high level competitive track, and he is 6 and 7 inches taller than the other guys and 70 and 80 pounds heavier than them that he's running against. I mean, he's a gigantic receiver, right? His body fat's like, 5% at that size. He's hitting 23.6 miles per hour this off season. But again, you're right. They need to see him really take two big steps forward in terms of his polish, his awareness on the field. The quarterback you're talking about, Lenora Sellers, another freaks list guy, 6'3", 245, can run in the 4.5s. I mean, people have compared him a little bit to Steve McNair. He's super strong. He's really smart. That's the other big thing about Sellers from talking to guys who coached him and, spending a little time with him. He's a really, really smart kid. Last year was his first year as a starter. Took a little bit of time to get rolling, but once he did, he played fantastic. That Clemson defense that was so talented, he ran away from the entire front four on several plays, and they just couldn't get him down. And he took over an offense, by the way, that only had one returning starter on offense. So the growing pains weren't just his, it was everybody around him.
Bruce, I don't know about you. I would be surprised if Arch Manning's in the draft next year, knowing how the Manning family works.
Same.
I'm
Yeah.
obviously around these guys. I would be pretty surprised, given his physical skill set, if Sellers is not the one that emerges from this quarterback group as the guy that gets picked first. And what is a pretty good quarterback class?
It should be. It really should be. So I'm Sellers will be interesting. There's going to be a second year as a starter now. It's a new system again. So Dowell Loggins, who NFL fans know that name. He was in the NFL for like 15, 20 years. He was the offensive coordinator. He really wanted Sellers was not a big recruit. He got passed over by a lot of people. He wanted to go to North Carolina. He was set to go to like Virginia and then Syracuse and then like late in his senior season, Loggins in South Carolina moved in. It was terrific. Loggins was with him for 2 years. He started for one after Spencer Rattler left, and now Loggins is the head coach at App State, and Mike Shula comes in to take over. So it's a little bit of a different system. I We'll see what's going to be if he's out after 2 years as a player and 3 years, three and out, or does he wait? I'm with you. I don't think Arch Manning's going to leave after just 1 year as a starter, even if it is a 16 game season where they play for the national title and it goes long. I still think that just from knowing Cooper Manning, his dad, really well, I just think that they are not going to rush him. They don't need to worry about money or anything like that. I think they can be patient. But this class, we mentioned Garrett Nussmeier before. His dad is the Saints offensive coordinator. Doug Nussmeier played in the NFL. He's really talented. Carson Beck, who 2 years ago people were buzzing about in NFL scouting circles at Georgia, and then he struggled last year, had an elbow injury. Now he's at Miami. People expect him at Miami to have a big year. This is a deep and interesting group. You got one guy who didn't make the freaks list at Penn State, but is looks the part. Drew Aller, 6'5", 245, moves pretty good, is really smart, got a big arm. He's a guy who has a chance to, I think, get a lot of attention. I mean, so this is I don't say it's a top heavy group, but there's a bunch of guys, including some really big guys. Like Beck's almost 6'4". Sellers is a huge man. Obviously, Aller is a really big guy. It's an interesting group beyond just Arch.
No, I'm with you. I think it's a really fun class. And it's funny, Bruce. Then I think after you get past Harbor, and again, we'll get to the guy number one on your list at the end. There's kind of a bit of a gap before you get to the next wide receiver. Any other wide receivers on this group kind of really intrigue you that jumped out, whether it's their story or their numbers that you got that maybe could sneak up on people a little bit in the draft process?
Chris Hilton is a wild card. Like he was a high level, high jumper coming out of high school, went to LSU. You can ask Malik Neighbors about him. He's seen how super freaky Chris Hilton is.
I'll ask him.
But yeah, no, ask him. I bet he'll have great stories because Chris Hilton is the guy. He's been like injured a bunch, but when he's played, I want to say he averages like 30 yards a touchdown catch. He's been a big play guy when he's healthy, but he just hasn't been healthy. And you think about all the elite receivers, like when he committed to LSU, they still had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And then at one point, there was Kayshon Boutte, who was a good receiver at LSU. Obviously, hadn't been a great star in the NFL, but they had him and Brian Tom. He's in this class with Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And he was a really big get for LSU. He's still there. Maybe this will be the year that he can stay healthy and puts it all together because he can like explosive. Like when you talk to people at LSU, they're like, yeah, he's the biggest freak skill guy we have. And there's other guys in that room. They have a legit track kid, Jelani Watkins, who's going to run 10 flat. They have another guy, Barrion Brown, who when the video games come out, they make his speed like 98. He transferred from Kentucky. It's, Hilton is the wild card. I'd be curious ask Malik Neighbors for his like, okay, do you think he's a freak? And see what kind of reaction you get. I'd be surprised if his eyes don't get big.
I will ask him and I will text you. No question about it. Didn't see a ton of running backs on the list, Bruce. Jeremiah Love, you could talk about why he's not on the list, by the way.
Okay.
But any other running backs, jump out at you when you're talking to people around the country?
Nick Singleton is the guy, in terms of like big size, 220 plus. He's going to run in the 4.3s. He's incredibly strong. He shares the job with Katron Allen, who's also a really good back, not as explosive, but really good football player. We'll see what Singleton does this year. I mean, I don't know if you get to share the job and you become a first round pick, but I could see him really lighting up the combine process. But he's a really good football player. Jeremiah Love, was a track guy in high school, not like a track guy like Nick Harbour where he's running 10-1. He was running 10-6. But if you watch Notre Dame games, you see him football speed. He is super fast. He's dynamic. He's a terrific football player. As I wrote on the freaks list, the reason why he was not in there and Notre Dame gave me like four guys, that they nominated forward. The reason why he wasn't there was he was coming off injury, and when he did test and do some of those things, he just wasn't quite the same at that point. And again, he's one of the best football players, and I would say he's the best running back in college football. But just in terms of this, it wasn't like he ran 10-1 in high school. He won the Missouri State 100-meter, but his time was good. It wasn't like, oh my God, like the Nick Harbor stuff. And but if you ask me who's the best running back in the country, I would definitely take Jeremiah Love.
Now I'm with you on that. You had a tight end very high on your list, a tight end that could have came out last year, got a lot of money to go back to Vanderbilt, Eli Stowers. What are you hearing about him? And he had a breakout year last year. Could those numbers even get even bigger this year?
They could. So he's interesting in that he was a four-star quarterback out of high school, went to Texas A&M, played at a big-time program, didn't really, get it going as a quarterback there. Transferred to New Mexico State, where they moved him to tight end. His quarterback at the time, Diego Pavia, who's a really fun player, dual threat guy, plays with a lot of moxie and great energy. They are both transferred along with their offensive coordinator to Vandy, and he broke out last year, as you said. Now he is kind of a secondary tight end where he's not going to be an inline blocker. He's 6'4", 235. He's going to broad jump 11.3. He's going to vertical jump, probably over 40 inches. He can really stretch defenses. He's a weapon. I think in college, he's a real problem. The only comparison I would probably be able to throw out of somebody like this is kind of in that Evan Ingram, but he might be even more explosive than Evan Ingram. And obviously, I know you know him well. He's an interesting player, especially in that, was the quarterback and now found a second life as a tight end, especially coming out of Las Cruces, New Mexico, where no one's paying attention to college football mostly.
All right, two other positions I want to hit. You have a linebacker class that's pretty impressive, headlined by Sonny Styles, but you have linebackers littered all over this list, Bruce.
Yeah, Sonny Styles is the guy. I saw him like last month out at a media event, and he's just a really impressive dude. His dad played in the NFL, won a Super Bowl. Sonny's 6'4", 240. He's vertical jumps 40 inches and broad jumps 11 feet. And he had told me from the time he was like 5 or 6, his dad was doing plyometrics with him and his brother. And and he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Do you think it paid off?" And I wanted him to go, "What do you think?" Because I mean, he's the guy everybody's like. This is that Big Ten media days, and he was the one guy everybody's like looking at, going, "Okay, that looks like something you'd see out of a movie or something." And he's a really good football player, makes a ton of plays. They, they Matt Patricia, who obviously NFL fans know from his days there, he's the new defensive coordinator there. He has two freaky linebackers there, Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese, who's right there with him. James Laurinaitis, he's the position coach. He is going to get spoiled with guys like that. The other one, and there's a bunch of them, as you said. Tony Rojas at Penn State is super fast. He made a ton of plays last year. I feel like he's a guy that I don't want to. It's not fair to say he's going to break out this year because he already had a phenomenal season last year. But Penn State has had so many guys in the front seven who are super freaky testers, and he's that too. I just think he's a guy that probably more people need to be talking about. Obviously, last year with Abdul, they had a headliner, and so he was getting a lot of the attention. And there's other guys here, including Durant. And Denai Dennis Sutton's a heck of a football player who finished the season strong. But I think Tony's a guy who more people will kind of, start to put out there as, the numbers are crazy with him. So I just think the numbers, the film, all of it, he's a playmaker. He's a stud.
All right, final position before we wrap up with a couple of overarching things. Only five cornerbacks on the list, Bruce, which I was taken a little bit aback by because usually you get some pretty crazy athletes at corner. Was that kind of a little surprising to you that more of those guys didn't get submitted to you for the top 100?
Yeah, and a couple of them are probably towards the bottom of the list are small school guys who are good players. I don't think they're like one of them is at UT Martin is a really undersized cornerback who's fast and explosive, but not he's not Tariq Woolen either.
Right.
Same thing with William and Mary's cornerback, who is long, but not like he's not 6'4". He's just got long arms, and he's a really good football player. Colby Taylor, who I've had, I think, on 3 years. He started his career at Wyoming, and he is long and he's dynamic. I don't think he's still pretty raw. He's now at Vanderbilt, but he is a very talented athlete. I'm curious, is he kind of a project? What does the NFL look at him? But yeah, this year is not what it has been in past. As you mentioned earlier, it's a lot of big people, especially on the D line, and certainly quite a few on the O line, I think. But in terms of corners, no, there's not. It's always interesting to go back and look. I love to watch. Like I watch a ton of NFL Network, and I'm watching a lot of preseason stuff, and I'm like, hey, I'm rooting for Ruben Lowry because I know the Cowboys got him as a free agent. He was like number 100 on the freaks list last year, and was a small school guy that looks like he's going to make an NFL roster, and because he's making a ton of plays in the preseason.
You love to see stuff like that. Number 90, Daniel Sparks, punter. What does a punter have to do to make the freaks list, Bruce? And is this the first specialist you've had on these lists?
It's not like so. Last year, I actually had a punter kickoff guy from Penn State who's like 6'6", 285, who's still there, who runs in the high 4.8s. Sparks is almost like a college basketball power forward. I mean, he's 6'6", he can really jump. I think there were like three or four specialists, maybe three punters and one kicker who I had referenced in there in some way or other who were in consideration. He's at Virginia. I mean, he's a really good specialist, but like he is a big dude. I mean, he kind of looks like he could play tight end right now. I mean, he's not 240, he's 228 or something like that, but really explosive athlete, can really run and jump.
Love it. All right, let's get to the number one guy on your list, Jeremiah Smith. The reason I left him for last is he's not draft eligible, Bruce, but assuming he has as big of a year as you all think he might, and I love your little anecdote you could tell it about his eating habits as a freshman at Ohio State. What is 2026 going to look like for him? Like, are there going to be screams that he shouldn't even play? Our team's going to try to throw crazy NIL money at him to get him to go to a different school?
They're
How do
already
you think
doing
this whole
that
thing's going to
part.
go with him?
They're already throwing crazy NIL money to try to get him to leave. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who will say the only thing you can do is get injured. Don't, be careful. I don't know what the insurance policy would be for him. He was the best receiver in college football last year when he came out and when he came into college. And I would tell some of my coworkers, because we did a bunch of Ohio State games at Fox, and I'm on the sideline for it. And just like I was like, you don't realize how big he is until you see him in person. And the best comparison I got for him is Andre Johnson from Miami, right? Like 6'3", 230, super strong, really physical. Like one of my last memories of Andre Johnson as a college player was him just physically abusing the Nebraska cornerbacks in the national title game. Like he was just throwing them off like they were pool noodles or something. Just a completely freaky athlete. This guy is way more polished at a younger age. It's funny. I met Jeremiah Smith's dad at a game early in the season, and we just kind of kept in touch. And we were talked about the Andre. He was like, "Yeah, I got a picture of everybody calls him JJ. I got a picture of JJ with Andre when JJ was like 7 years old." And so I did a big story on Jeremiah Smith last fall, and we included the picture of him with Andre Johnson. They're both South Florida, Miami kids. So he like as great as the receivers have been coming out of Ohio State, and obviously they've almost all backed it up, whether it's Olave or Garrett Wilson, you had Marvin Harrison Jr. recently, you had Terry McLaurin. This guy is the best combination by far of all of it. He's the biggest, he's the strongest, he might be the fastest because he's running 23.5 miles per hour. Marvin Harrison Jr., after all those other guys, was the best combination. This guy's much stronger and he's a little faster and he's probably way more physical. He's 6'3.5", he's almost 225. He broad jumps 11 feet. And the thing I said to him, of all the freaky things you're able to do, what's the thing you're most proud of? And he said, it's probably my bench press and my strength, because I got up to 220 to 20 reps at 225 on the bench press. He goes, when I got here, I was only about 5. So he's put on, he's gone from 5 to 20 in a little over a year. And that's obviously a lot for any receiver, much less one who's, 19 years old.
It's funny. I thought you would have said getting off the Wendy's after eating fast food every day for his whole freshman year.
I know he was like, yeah, I was basically eating it every day. And I'm like, it's like you have obviously great genetics if you're able to like eat all that stuff and still look the way he did and do what he did. But I think again, this is a guy who, from a really early age, he was very dialed in and very driven and focused and motivated. And so he and his dad and Jeremiah as well talked a lot about that. And I think that has given him such an incredible foundation, an incredible head start on all these other guys. I mean, he's not only the number one freak in college football, he's the best player. I don't even think it's close to anybody else in college football.
Yeah, I can't. I love Wendy's too. I can't blame him. All right, Bruce. Final question. You follow college football closer than anyone. What's one storyline, maybe team, player, trend that maybe you think is being overlooked in college football this year that not enough people are talking about, that you think could either impact the season, the draft, or just something that you're really tracking throughout the year? You can go in any direction you want here.
I think it's going to be fascinating. Well, we were talking about Chris Hilton a minute ago. I think LSU is one of the more interesting stories we have in college football. Brian Kelly did a terrific job at Notre Dame. He left there 3 years ago, had a good start. Obviously had Jaden Daniels, who transferred in and became a Heisman winner. A lot of other really good players. And now it's year four, and the pressure's on. LSU is spending a fortune on their transfer portal guys. They have a lot of talent. This Kelly just said this is the most talented team he's had. His buyout is enormous, north of $50 million. But if he doesn't get them to the playoff this year, which means you have to be, make a 12-team playoff, which isn't unrealistic at all. I think there will be a lot of pressure at LSU to get rid of him. Now, whether that means they can do something to use to get him out of the buyout if they don't make the playoff, I would not be surprised, because the one thing the three coaches who came before him at LSU, that's Ed Ogeron, Les Miles, and Nick Saban, the only thing they have in common is that they all won national titles at LSU and all did it within the first 4 years. This is a huge story. And it's going to get out the gate in a big way because they play on the road at Clemson. Kelly has talked a lot about how big of a game this is. He's not shying away. He's pushing in on it, saying how like they have tigers, Clemson tiger paws all over their facility, just kind of reinforce it. If they don't win that game, then a couple weeks later they play a good Florida team who they lost to last year. It's going to be a really interesting season in Baton Rouge.
And talking about pressure, by the way, how about Penn State? I don't remember the last time, Bruce, where they were ranked ahead of Ohio State and Michigan, have the best quarterback between the three schools as well. I got to imagine there's a lot of pressure in Penn State to finally get over the hump and win that Big Ten.
Yeah, not just the best quarterback. You're right about that, but they also have the best two running backs. They have two running backs who are better than anybody at Michigan or Ohio State this year. They have the best D lineman in Zane Durant. Now, they don't have the best player. Ohio State has the best offensive and defensive players in Jeremiah Smith and safety Caleb Downs. But they also have, uh, a great combination of coordinators, right? So their offense coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, is very well respected, came in last year, did really well. Their defensive coordinator just helped Ohio State win a national title, Jim Knowles. He's there. So now you got Ohio State and Michigan. Obviously, Wink Martindale, I know you know him. He is at Michigan. The offense coordinator is new. We'll see how Chip Lindsey does. At Ohio State, you have two new coordinators on both sides. So yes. So and Ohio, and also I would say Penn State probably has the best offensive line of both of those teams too.
Wow.
If there was ever a year where Penn State is going to win the Big Ten and make a national title run, you would think this is it.
And I'm sorry, I was going to wrap, but you mentioned Caleb Downs. He was not on your list, which I was surprised by, given some people think he might be the second best player in college football after Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, I mean, a brilliant kid, terrific football player, really good athlete. I mean, returns punts for them too.
Yeah.
Just quite not like when I would ask those, both Smith and Styles, I was like, who else is in the freaks discussion? They gave me a guy, Brunton Jones, who was a former walk-on, who's the defensive back, who they say is the biggest freak, whose numbers are kind of like theirs, to be honest.
Yeah, and you know what? Look, I think playing safety, what's going on up here is much more important than what's going on with the Freaks List stuff anyway. You can find the Freaks List on The Athletic. I will link it when I tweet this out for the folks out there. Make sure you click on that. It's a must read to get you ready for the college football season and the draft. Bruce, do you have anything else going on that you want to promote before we say goodbye?
No, just check us out on Fox Sports, and I'm in studio this year. Again, it'll be a fun season. I get to work with Chris Peterson, the old Washington and Boise State coach. There's nobody better to watch football with.
And you got a podcast too, right? Do you want to plug that?
I do, yeah. Check us out on the Audible. It's with myself, Stuart Mandel, and Ralph Russo's joining us this year. And we have a fun time with just talking about it. And for anybody who hasn't seen, there's one other thing I would want to plug, I guess. So anybody who hasn't seen the Arch Manning story we did a couple of like a month or so ago, just really the idea was about what it was like for his parents, Cooper and Ellen Manning, to raise, quote, the next Manning. Because obviously Cooper is the one brother with, Arch, with Eli and Peyton, obviously great NFL quarterbacks, was around it, but those, as great as they were, they did not grow up in the era of social media, which his son Arch is. And so all the challenges that come with it, it's kind of a fascinating, as a young parent, I feel like going through our own situation, it was an interesting perspective to hear Cooper and Ellen talk about how they raised Arch. And I think people will be fascinated once they take a look at that story.
Ironically, Bruce, one of Eli Manning's former offensive linemen, Chris Snee, has a really highly ranked quarterback. I think Don Bosco is going through here in New Jersey. So you'll be hearing about him coming down the pike pretty soon.
Awesome. Thanks for the heads up on that.
Bruce, you're the man. Thank you so much. Enjoy the football season, and we will talk to you in the spring leading up to the draft. I appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
That's all the time we have for draft season presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. We thank Bruce Feldman for joining us again. Go check out his Freaks List. Freaks List. You can find it at The Athletic. Just find it on his Twitter handle. It's linked up. And when I tweet out the promotion for this podcast, I will put the link in there for it as well. Always a great way to get ready for the college football season and know what players to kind of keep an eye on as we already start thinking about the 2026. That's right. NFL Draft. For Bruce Feldman, I'm John Schmeelk. That's draft season. Thank you for joining us in the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. We'll see you next time, everybody.